Hi, I'm Briony Marshall. I'm a sculptor and I also teach at the Art Academy London. So my pathway into the arts took a little bit of time. I was really into art at school, did 2 art GCSEs, art A-level, did a bit of art on my gap year, but I was always quite academic and into sciences. So I studied science at university and I nearly went back to art school as soon as I left university, but didn't quite have the guts and wanted to earn some money. But after about 4 years, I decided this was something I just had to do. I couldn't not do it. So I went back and studied sculpture, and I've been a professional artist now for 16 years. I had a fantastic solo show at Pank in London. They gave me a 1-year residency in their building and helped sponsor the making of some large pieces, which was fantastic. And then just last year I had a great commission for Tonbridge School. I made a huge 4-metre sculpture that's hanging in the centre of their new science building. So alongside being an artist, I also teach, and part of that is out of necessity because being an artist can be a little bit feast and famine at times, whereas the teaching is a steady bread and butter income that you can rely on. But it is really interesting, you know, when you have to teach, you have to work things out in your head a lot more, and it's great. I do a mixture of teaching sculpture and I also teach professional development. And at the Art Academy London, I think we're fairly unique in art schools in that we help prepare our students to actually be professional artists when they leave. Sometimes when I'm teaching my students, I think I really ought to be doing what I'm telling them to do, which is a good reminder. But being an artist, you also have to run a business. You've got to become an expert at marketing, selling yourself, finance, and understanding how the art world works and how to promote yourself as an artist whilst keeping your practice as the centre of what you do is a really, really difficult thing to do. And it's quite interesting working with students and seeing how they can start balancing this. And I think, you know, today's artists are really amazing, that they can do some amazing stuff on that front. So it's interesting thinking about which artists do this well, who's good at the self-promotion and stuff. And I think it can be very mixed. It really depends on their practice. I think when what they do is very closely aligned to the practice, it's strong, because then it feels like a natural thing. But also the ones that do well tend to be the ones who are on the ball. When you have an opportunity, you chase it up, you follow up, you're professional, you're enjoyable to work with. I mean, some people do great work, but if they're a bit of a rude word to work with, you know, other people won't want to work with them, so don't be a prima donna. So being an artist is difficult. Being a sculptor, I think, is even more difficult. You know, a 2D work, people can imagine hanging on their wall, but finding space for an object, a 3-dimensional object, is difficult. I think some people kind of overcome that by doing the whole sort of garden sculpture thing. Then you have to make sort of things that will withstand the weather as well. It's difficult. It is difficult being a sculptor because it's harder to sell into the domestic art market. There are fewer galleries that work with sculptors. There are probably fewer collectors that collect sculptors, but I mean, I love it and it's great. And then also when you have all this work that you've made that you have to store, it's a hell of a lot harder to stack sculptures than it is paintings. I sometimes wish I painted miniatures, and then my life would be a lot easier. More recently, I've been to overcome some of these challenges. I think it is useful to have works that are more easily saleable. So I have been framing small sculptures so that people can buy them and put them on their walls, and it is the things that sell the most easily of all the stuff that I make. It's not necessarily the stuff people love the most, so I view it a bit as a sideline, but it is helpful to keep, you know, some sort of pipeline of sales, so that you are living off your work as well as the teaching and things like that. So I teach at the Art Academy London, and we do a lot of work with our students on professional development. But professional development doesn't stop once you graduate. In fact, it probably only just starts. It is very important, what's it called, sharpening the saw in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's important to invest in yourself and keep developing professionally. I think one of the most easy ways of doing that is to build a network of peers, and I'm a big fan of creating your own peer network. With my students, I've been teaching them techniques to have like peer mentoring sessions using action learning set techniques, which are quite specific, but it's a really great way that you're not just meeting up for a chat, you're actually meeting up with fellow artists for a really kind of working session where you help sort out each other's problems. You bring problems to the group to be discussed, which is slightly different from crits, because it's not necessarily just about the work, it's about surviving as an artist. And I think it's something I really recommend my students do when we work on ideas for how you might set up your own group. And a lot of my past students have created artist collectives, and they show together and they continue that mutual support, because it can be a very lonely life being in your studio on your own. And I think if you can set up your own artist group in some ways, that will help you on all sorts of levels with knowing what's going on, ideas for promoting yourself. You know, each person in that group will be expert at something and will be able to teach each other, whether one's great at social media, the other one knows like a great gallery that you can hire for not that much. You know, there will be the resources in that group to help sustain each other. And I think that's the best piece of advice I could give anyone leaving art college and trying to make it as a professional artist. The sort of other artist work that inspires me can be quite varied, but I am really interested in sort of art and science. Having come from a scientific background, I kind of view the world and analyse it with a fairly scientific brain on me. But I also like materials and processes a lot, and I quite like, you know, formalistic elements of work, so how it's made and the aesthetics. I think are important. I think somehow really strong works, I feel, have all the elements. There's food for thought, but also food for the eye and the enjoyment of it. Not necessarily beauty, but definitely an aesthetic content as well. A lot of my process actually involves desk-based research on science, and in some ways it's totally self-indulgent because I really find it interesting and I love making stuff, and I've somehow managed to meld these two strong interests of mine into something which hopefully has some wider value beyond just the fact that I enjoy doing it. I think when you're applying for any opportunity as an artist, you've got to make sure that you use your time wisely and you pick the opportunities well, and you've got to realise that any open competition is going to be a bit of a lottery. But look at the previous winners, look at the types of work that they show, and really be realistic about whether you're at the same stage of career as that. So that's my advice for any artist thinking of applying for an opportunity. So I think one of the things that you've got to realise when you're trying to build an art career is you need a lot of patience. Things take a long time, but you've got to sort of put yourself out there a lot. A friend of mine came up with this analogy that you have to ping on someone's radar, and the first time you ping on their radar, they're not going to do anything about it. But if they sort of notice you several times, then eventually their focus and their attention will come to you. And then when it might be that they love your work immediately, but they haven't got anything on that fits it. But then, a couple of years later, they may be organising a show where your work fits perfectly. But if you'd only pinged once on their radar, they'd have forgotten you. But if you are sort of there doing things, putting on DIY shows, meeting people, you've got to get out there and be present in the art world to then get the opportunities. And they will come eventually. But it's a lot of work and a lot of patience. And unless you love it, go and find some easy way of earning your money. So when I'm a judge on the Emerging Art Prize, I look forward to opening up the applications and seeing work that surprises me, stuff that's well made or interestingly made. I love process and nice objects, but I also look for something that has a bit of meaning behind it, that there's a bit of depth as well. It's not just about the aesthetics, that there's some interesting meshing of process materials and meaning. What does the art world need more of? I think it needs more opportunities for artists and more spread of the wealth. I think a lot of the money in the art world is concentrated in a tiny 1 or 2% at the top whose work sells for gazillions. and it'd be great if that could be spread through more evenly. And I don't know how you do that. I think if everyday ordinary people actually were brave enough and to be able to go and buy real artists' work and engage with artists and what they're doing, I think that would be fantastic.